I found out Cynthia might be pregnant the same week I got my first real paycheck from the hospital. I was sitting on the curb outside the clinic, still in scrubs, with her standing over me saying, "It might be twins." Like it was a punchline. Back up 2 months, I didn't even know her. My buddy Mason set us up, said his girl had a friend who'd be good for loosening you up. I was 26, straight out of med school, just starting my surgical residency at Mercy General in Omaha. Long shifts, no sleep, and no time for games. But I showed up. She walked into that restaurant like she already owned it. Cynthia Simmons, dancer, waitress, lit up like a neon sign. 28. Full face of makeup and hair she probably did with one hand while texting with the other. First thing she said to me was, "You really look like you pay your taxes early." I laughed. She leaned in, eyes like she knew something I didn't. "I'm kidding. It's cute. Old school. I like that." Quick note. Before we start, Merry Christmas. I hope you're warm, safe, and with someone you love. If you're up for it, drop a comment sharing where you're listening from. I love seeing where this reaches. All right, let's continue. That blind date turned into another one, then 3. Then we were spending every night together that I wasn't pulling a 16-hour shift. I quoted dumb movies from the 80s, and she'd roll her eyes and laugh anyway. "You're like aggressively stable," she told me once, half draped over my couch. "It's like flirting with a school teacher." She made it feel like I was being chased for the first time in my life, like I was the prize. And maybe I wanted to believe I could have both, love and medicine, if I just kept showing up. I told her about my mom, Joanne, in a wheelchair, living with me. Told her I couldn't be out every night because I had to help her with dinner, meds, bedtime. Cynthia said clubs were just music, but she still disappeared every other Friday and came back smelling like sweat and someone else's cologne. Still, I stayed. I told myself she'd settle. She just needed time. It was only 2 months when she said she missed her period. Then she showed me the test. We went to the clinic. Ultrasound tech squinted, adjusted the machine, and said, "You're looking at 2 heartbeats." I looked at Cynthia. She looked at the ceiling. I cracked a joke because I didn't know what else to do. "Hey, Ghostbusters had 2. So can we." She rolled her eyes. Didn't laugh. 5 months later, she went into labor early. It was fast and messy, and I don't think I even processed it until I had 2 red-faced girls screaming in my arms. I sang the theme from Back to the Future, because it was the only thing I could think of, and they actually stopped crying. That's when I broke. Just quietly, standing in the corner of that hospital room while Cynthia stared at the wall. We named them Hope and Fate. I signed every form they gave me. Full legal father, emergency contact, whatever they needed. After that, she slipped. I mean hard. She stared through the babies like they were static on a TV screen. "I need a reset," she whispered one night, holding her keys. Just one night. Nights turned into weekends. She came back smelling like she'd danced off the edge of the world. "I'm sorry," she said once, hugging me while I held a bottle and burp cloth. I can't. 6 months in, she didn't come back. I called, texted, waited. On day 5, I filed a missing person report. Cops didn't care. That night, I got a single text. "I'm not built for this. Don't call." I stood in the kitchen, between 2 cribs, sink full of bottles, diapers in the trash. My mom rolled in and touched my hand. "We'll get through it," she said, real quiet. And I believed her, because I had to. After Cynthia vanished, I called the hospital the next morning and asked for a meeting. The program director didn't look surprised when I said I was stepping off the surgery track. He nodded slow, told me the door would stay open if and when. That was it. No speech, no gold watch, just me, a badge change, and the reality that residency hours and twin babies don't mix. I took what I could get. Tuesday and Thursday nights as a pre-op assistant, cleaning tools, pushing gurneys, holding scared hands through intravenous lines. Saturday mornings I worked clinic transport, wheelchairs mostly, and the occasional gurney down the hall for scans. Sundays, I packed supply crates for the mobile units, paid trash, but it kept the lights on and formula stocked. Hope drank like she was training for a contest. Fate took her time, but that kid could cry like a fire alarm. Joanne, my mom, did what she could from her chair. She couldn't chase a toddler, but she could hold a crying baby better than anyone I've ever seen. She'd hum these soft church lullabies barely above a whisper, and both girls would just melt into her lap. She'd say things like, "Let them feel safe first. Everything else comes after." I learned to sleep in pieces. 10 minutes here, 20 there. I stacked naps like Tetris blocks, aiming for one full shower a day if I got lucky. I got fast at diapers. I could warm bottles with one hand while balancing fate on my hip. You stop overthinking real quick when the alternative is two screaming infants at once. One night I was dragging trash to the curb when Thane and Morella from next door waved me over. Morella handed me a lasagna and said, "We had leftovers and a baby gate we're not using anymore. You're gonna need it once they're mobile." I almost cried over that stupid gate. I didn't, but I almost did. Reverend Ellis Brandt, who'd done my mom's prayer group years back, started stopping by. No sermons, no pressure, just 10 minutes. He'd sit at the edge of the couch, nod at the girls, and say a quiet prayer over them, like it was the most normal thing in the world. Then he'd leave without waiting for thanks. That kind of man. Thursdays, I'd walk the girls to the park in the double stroller, just to feel like a human again. There was this bakery stand on the corner, run by a guy named Lyle Penner. Blue cap, always humming. After the second time he saw me with both girls, he started handing me a brown paper bag of day-old rolls. "For the twins," he'd say, pretending he didn't see me slip a 5 into the tip jar. I kept a notebook, just a cheap one from Walgreens. Every dollar in, every dollar out. Diapers, wipes, rent, heating. I tracked it all down to the cent. Told myself I'd go back to scrubs once things settled. Then I laughed at myself because the word settled felt like a joke. At night, I'd sit with the baby monitor balanced on one knee, a peanut butter sandwich in one hand, and an old movie on mute. The Outsiders was a favorite. I'd whisper lines into the quiet room. "Stay gold, pony boy." And Hope would blink like she got the joke. Or maybe she just liked the sound of my voice. No one from Cynthia's side ever called. Not her mother, not her friends. Like she'd been beamed off the planet. I sent one letter to a P.O. box number she'd texted me months back. Just a Christmas card with a photo of the girls. Hope and Fate in matching green pajamas under a blinking string of lights. It came back undeliverable 2 weeks later. No return address. No message. That first Christmas hurt more than I let on. I sat on the floor with the twins in my lap, surrounded by hand-me-down toys and dollar store wrapping paper. Joanne was in her chair humming, her eyes red but steady. She never once asked about Cynthia. She just rocked, held one baby at a time, and whispered, "They've got you. That's what matters." I stopped waiting for rescue after that. The girls started to fall into rhythm. Hope laughed first, loud and sudden like a spark. Fate would watch her sister for a second and then copy, softer but just as warm. I started seeing them as people, not just little bundles of need. They had moods, favorites, signals. I got good at reading them. I also got good at doing everything with one hand. Bottles, laundry, making sandwiches, flipping pages in that stupid notebook of expenses. One hand for the world, the other for whichever daughter needed me more at that moment. Sometimes I saw myself in the mirror, pale and underslept, shirt inside out, baby spit on my shoulder, and I'd say, "Just one more day, then one more after that." That was the game. You didn't win it, you just didn't quit. One Saturday in February, the girls fell asleep on my chest at the same time, just passed out cold. I sat there frozen for almost an hour, afraid to move. Outside it was snowing. Inside, I could hear the hum of the fridge and my own heartbeat. That moment, that was when I realized I might actually be doing okay. Not perfect, not thriving, but steady. By the time spring crept in, I had lines under my eyes, a schedule stuck to the fridge, and 2 daughters who smiled when I walked into the room. Hope had 2 bottom teeth. Fate had a habit of patting my face like she was checking to make sure I was still real. I didn't have answers. I barely had a plan. But I kept showing up. And somehow they started to believe I wasn't going anywhere. I was washing out a bottle when I saw the car roll up. Black Lincoln, clean but not shiny, like it got waxed out of duty, not vanity. The man who stepped out looked like a slab of granite in a navy jacket. Tall, broad, maybe mid-60s. He carried 1 brown paper bag under one arm, 3 small boxes under the other. He didn't smile. He knocked once, firm. I opened the door with Fate on my hip and Hope chewing on a teether behind my knee. He looked straight at me and said, "I'm Gary Simmons. I'm here to stand behind my granddaughters. And you." I didn't say a word at first. I'd only seen his face once, in a photo Cynthia kept on her phone. Her in a wrinkled Christmas sweater, drunk off something cheap, leaning on a man who looked uncomfortable but proud. This version was older, heavier in the shoulders, and calmer. Like he'd already done his shouting years ago and left it behind. "I'd like to sit at your table," he said. I stepped aside without answering. We sat across from each other while the girls banged plastic cups against their high chairs. He set the boxes down, opened one. Inside were a couple stuffed animals and 2 brand new board books. He glanced at the girls, nodded once. "I'm sorry about my daughter," he said. "I'm not here to excuse her, and I'm not here to fix her. I'm here to make sure these girls don't pay for what she couldn't carry." He didn't blink when he said it. He didn't lean in, didn't soften the words, just laid them down like lumber. Then he looked at the girls again, hard, not creepy, intentional. His eyes went from Hope's hair to Fate's nose and ears like he was cross-referencing them against an invisible chart. Then his voice cracked a little. "That's my mother's side right there. She'd have spoiled them rotten." I was still trying to figure out how to breathe when he pulled out 2 envelopes from the inside of his jacket. "$300 each," he said. "For shoes, not for shame." "We're okay," I said. "Really, we've got enough." He looked at me like I was missing the point. "You're doing great. That's different from having enough." Joanne rolled out from the hallway just then. She hadn't said a word since he walked in. He stood up when he saw her. "You must be Joanne," he said, offering his hand. She looked him up and down, then smiled faintly and shook it. "And you're late." He laughed for the first time, full-chested, not loud but warm. "That's fair," he said. He helped her carry the bottles to the sink without asking. She didn't argue. Then he turned to me and asked, "What do you need most?" Joanne answered before I could. "Breathing room." I grabbed the notebook off the counter, the one with every receipt, every diaper expense, every rent check tracked down to the penny, and handed it to him. He didn't flinch, just flipped through a few pages, then nodded slow. "I'll handle daycare, and we're going to talk about something better than this apartment." That was when the door opened again. I hadn't heard a second car pull up. A woman walked in. Early 20s, dark hair pulled back, serious eyes, no makeup, and not one wasted movement. "This is my granddaughter," Gary said. "Paula Simmons, my late son's daughter. She's finishing a grad program in biomechanics at State." I stood up. She didn't blink. Just walked over and reached for Hope like she'd known her a year. Hope leaned in without hesitation. Fate turned her head, blinked twice, and then tucked into Paula's shoulder like she already recognized her. "I've read about you," Paula said to me. "And them." Gary leaned on the counter. "She's their cousin, Cynthia's niece. I wanted her to meet them early. Build a bond now. Family's like cement. You pour it right or it doesn't hold." "I don't want to crowd you," Paula said, "but I'm here if you need help." I nodded, not sure what to say. Gary didn't make a single demand. No tests, No lawyers, no threats, just terms. I'll contribute. I'll advise if you want it, but I won't override you, and I'll keep Cynthia out of this unless she gets healthy. You've done the work, Nate. I'm just adding hands to the job. That hit hard. I didn't know how to respond, so I said what I meant. Thank you. He shook my hand like it meant something. Then he hugged Joanne like they'd been old friends who just hadn't met until now. They stayed for 2 hours. Paula fed one baby while I rocked the other. Gary asked about my job schedule, read through my scribbled notes, and made a list of what the girls were outgrowing. He didn't treat it like a favor. He treated it like his job. When they finally left, the apartment felt quiet in a way I hadn't felt in months. I turned off the light, stood in the dark kitchen with the sink still full, and the girls sleeping in their cribs. For the first time in a long time, I let myself breathe. Really breathe. Not in gasps between tasks, but a full breath that reached my back, because it felt like, for once, someone else had put their shoulder under my side of the load. A few weeks later, Gary drove me and Paula an hour outside the city and turned down a gravel drive lined with maples just starting to leaf out. At the end of the drive stood a long-limbed farmhouse painted white with blue trim, a sloped porch out front, and a sagging swing that still moved when the wind caught it right. The roof looked like it had held a century's worth of snow, and the foundation sat solid. I didn't say anything, but I gripped the notebook in my lap tighter. Inside, it smelled like lemon cleaner and books. Wide doorways, real wood floors, and a kitchen with a long oak table that looked like it had seen hard conversations and big meals. Ramps led to every entrance, smooth and sturdy. Joanne rolled across the threshold like it was built for her. She ran a hand across the table and said, "This table will hear laughter." She didn't smile, but I knew what she meant. Orrin and Sylvie Haldane met us in the living room. Kind folks, probably in their late 50s. Sylvie hugged Paula like they'd known each other longer than an hour. Orrin showed me the den with a soft pride, pointing out the shelf of paperbacks, mostly worn westerns and crime thrillers, and the pair of apple trees out back that leaned toward the morning like they're saying grace. "They'll fruit better if you trim 'em in February," he said. Gary took a quiet call on the porch while we walked the property. By the time we looped around, he was off the phone and holding a key ring. "It's done," he said. Then he handed me the keys without ceremony. "This is family, not a favor. You'll outwork it, and I know that already." I took them. Not because I felt ready, but because he said it like a fact. That night we drove back and packed up everything worth taking. The apartment didn't hold much. Some folded baby clothes, a chipped mug from med school, Joanne's photos, the ledger. Thane and Morella heard the news before I could tell them. Thane backed his truck into our old alley with a crooked grin and a crate full of tools I never asked for. Morella labeled plastic bins with categories like urgent baby, not baby but important, and misc possible trash. Reverend Ellis came to bless the steps before we even unloaded the second crib. He didn't make it a sermon. He stood at the door, touched the frame, and said, "Let this be peaceful ground." Then he looked at the twins in my arms and added, "Let them grow strong here." We didn't say anything after that. We just stood there for a full minute. That first night, hope and fate slept through for the first time since I could remember. I woke up before them and thought I'd missed something. I hadn't. I brewed the cheapest coffee money could buy, and it tasted rich under those new rafters. I sat on the porch while the birds went nuts in the trees. That was the first morning in a long time I didn't feel like the ground under me might shift at any second. Gary pulled me into the garage later that week. It still smelled like oil and dust, and I figured he wanted to talk chores. Instead, he rolled out a whiteboard on wheels and started talking fast. "Modular socket design," he said. "For veterans mostly. We've been trying to fix comfort and rotation issues for years. These guys limp out of fittings like it's a trade-off. It shouldn't be." He pointed to a sketch. "We want to try a flex rig connector at the hip, but it's not translating well. Paula's been helping." Paula stepped in with a notebook full of diagrams and notes that made my head spin. She was all business, hair up, sleeves rolled, eyes sharp. We're using sensor data from 3 different trials. Gary's old shop built the last prototype, but we think you can tighten the field testing. I'm not an engineer, I said. I'm a guy who was supposed to be in an OR right now. You're a guy who knows anatomy and cares about pain, Gary said. That's more useful than another desk jockey. I didn't answer right away, but I stepped closer to the board and asked where the main stress points were. Paula pointed to the upper socket line, and we started from there. That night I called the residency director. I thought I'd get the runaround, maybe a guilt trip, but the guy picked up on the second ring and said, "Coleman, you okay?" "I'm not coming back this year," I said. "Probably not next year either. I've got the twins full-time and a shot at something different." There was a pause. Then, "You've got hands. Use them where they do good. Come back when life makes space for it. We'll keep your file active." It hit me that he didn't see it as quitting, just redirection. That meant more than I expected. A few days later, Gary set up a coffee meeting with a man named Gavin Rusk. 36 straight shooter, ran the R&D floor at a regional prosthetics center that had contracts with 3 state clinics and a VA pilot. Gavin had a handshake like a wrench and didn't waste time. "You got drawings?" he asked. I handed over my sketchbook. Half notes from Paula, half thoughts from late nights. And he flipped through it. Slow. Then he tapped a page where I'd scribbled a rough fix for an alignment issue that kept showing up in Gary's field tests. "If you can show up," Gavin said, "I can show you the ropes." I nodded. "Then I'll show up." The first time I walked into Gavin's shop, it smelled like burnt rubber and coffee that had been reheated 3 times too many. Half the benches had half-built limbs or socket molds resting on foam blocks, and there were clamps everywhere, on walls, on carts, dangling from pipes. Nobody greeted me. I clocked in, grabbed a broom, and got to work. Gavin didn't babysit. He pointed once, said, "Sweep benches, measure twice, don't talk unless you're sure," and walked off like he had fires to put out. So I swept, I wiped down tools, I restocked epoxy, I kept my mouth shut. When a guy named Vern asked if I even knew what a test socket was, I just nodded and kept working. At lunch I sat outside, alone, eating a sandwich I couldn't taste because I was too busy trying to remember how alignment loads worked. Paula joined me halfway through the week, cross-legged with a salad and a binder full of spreadsheets that looked like they needed their own PhD. "I'm starting to think you're a robot," I told her. She grinned without looking up. "Robots don't spill coffee on their own data tables. Ask me how I know." That became our thing. Quiet lunches, long glances over diagrams, and burritos after her evening lab sessions. I'd show up at her place with takeout, and she'd open the door with a pencil in her hair and numbers on her wrists like tattoos. Gary didn't interfere. He wrote checks for the girls, formula, daycare, car seat upgrades, and stayed out of the shop. That helped more than I knew. Gavin didn't treat me like a charity case because Gary didn't blur the line. It kept things clean. Professional. I needed that. Week 3, a tech named Neil muttered something loud enough for me to hear. "Boyfriend hire. Wonder how long that lasts." I didn't snap. I stayed after hours instead and fixed a socket fit that had been giving one of the test guys a raw blister on his stump. Took 2 tries and half a roll of liner foam, but I got the pressure zone shifted. The guy walked 5 minutes longer the next morning with no pain. Gavin checked the chart, nodded once and said, "That's the job." He didn't high-five me or slap my back. But that nod, it meant the world. The girls got used to the new rhythm. I still did bedtime every night. Fate always asked for the jet song, which meant me whisper-singing Danger Zone with my terrible rhythm until she dropped off. Hope preferred when I hummed Take On Me, and if I missed a note, she let me know. Loudly. Joanne ran the house like a ship captain. Efficient, no nonsense, steady. She handled groceries with Gary in a tag team routine so smooth I stopped questioning it. He'd show up with bags and jokes. She'd roll her eyes and make him do the lifting. They made it look easy. One day I found out Gary had quietly paid off a medical bill I didn't even know was still floating out there. When I confronted him, he just shrugged and said, Clean ledgers make clean futures. We started a pilot test that same month with a retired sergeant named Wallace, 51, stiff back, hard eyes, walked with a cane and a chip on both shoulders. He wanted to hunt again. "One more season with my son before I croak," he said. I measured his gait, molded the socket, and Gavin did the final fit. We walked Wallace down a gravel path behind the shop with the test leg on. He moved slow, cursing under his breath. 10 minutes later, he stopped, stared at the tree line. Then he turned around, eyes wet. He whispered, "I didn't think it'd work." I pretended my eyes were dusty. Later in the car, I sat in silence and told myself this was where I belonged. For now, at least. Paula and I didn't put labels on anything, but the shift happened. It wasn't dramatic, no big kiss in the rain, no long speeches. She'd hand me her tablet, I'd hand her a warmed bottle. I'd brush her hair off her face while she mumbled through a late-night data entry meltdown. She'd text me to stop drinking gas station coffee and then bring me worse gas station coffee just to make a point. That's how it grew. One night after I fixed an alignment issue in a prototype limb that would have set a guy back a month of rehab, Gavin handed me a sheet with a bump in hourly pay, $1.75 more, and a one-time bonus of $900. He didn't say congratulations. Just, "Good catch. Don't let it be a fluke." I didn't tell anyone right away. I stopped at the grocery store, bought the girls' animal crackers, and swung by a local thrift shop where I picked up a ceramic ring bank shaped like a tree stump. At home, I labeled it with Sharpie. Someday. Someday wasn't a ring yet, but I knew where I wanted it to go. That night, Joanne caught me staring at the counter, like it might talk back. She didn't ask questions, just handed me a towel and said, "Dry the cups before the water spots set." So I did. I slept better that week. Not because anything got easy, nothing about prosthetics or toddlers ever does, but because things started to add up. Like every late night, every stubbed toe on a toy, every measured socket, every spreadsheet I squinted through next to Paula. Somehow it all lined up. A real path. No backup plans, just forward. And when I walked through the door at the end of the day, 2 little voices screamed, "Dada!" like I was the prize at the end of the tunnel. Turns out, that was enough. Gavin didn't make a big announcement when he moved me into a bigger role on the pilot. He just handed me a thicker folder, added my name to 2 more meetings and said, "You're owning this part now. Don't drop it." A month later, when the project bonus cleared, $3,400 after taxes, I didn't hesitate. I drove straight to a small jeweler off Maple, the kind of place with one counter and a man who looks you in the eye. "I want simple," I said. "Something that won't catch on gloves or get in the way of work." He nodded and brought out a round-cut ring, clean and plain, set low. No drama, no tricks. It felt right in my hand. I paid, tucked it into my jacket, and sat in the car for a minute longer than needed, letting the engine idle while I stared at the steering wheel. My hands shook. I let them. That weekend, I asked Gary if we could talk man to man. He didn't ask why. We sat on the back steps with the yard stretching out in front of us, the apple trees just starting to bud. The girls were inside with Joanne, the low hum of cartoons bleeding through the screen door. "I want your blessing," I said. "I want to ask Paula to marry me." Gary didn't answer right away. He looked at the yard like he was measuring it, counting distances, checking slope. Then he smiled, slow, sure, and said, "She's her own decider, but yes, son, yes." He clapped my shoulder once, firm, and that was it. No lecture, no conditions. I picked a Tuesday because nothing important ever happens on a Tuesday, and I wanted the day to be ours. Candles in mason jars down the length of that oak table. Joanne insisted on cooking lemon chicken and told me 3 separate times not to burn the vegetables. Paula showed up with her hair still damp from lab, wearing a sweater she liked because it didn't snag on anything. The girls were already in their chairs, banging forks and smiling like they knew something was coming. I waited until plates were cleared, and Joanne disappeared into the kitchen under the excuse of checking on dessert, which we all knew was a lie. I didn't kneel. I stayed where I was, steady, because that felt honest. I told Paula about the first month after the twins were born. The worst night when both cried until dawn, and I thought I might split in half. I told her about the first morning after, when they slept for 20 minutes, and I felt like I'd been handed a map. I told her I wanted to build the next decades with her, slow or fast, whatever she needed, but together. She didn't hesitate, not a second. She said yes like she'd been holding it for weeks. For the record, because people like to invent stories, Paula and I share no blood or family relation. She is Cynthia's niece, my girl's maternal first cousin. She is not my relative. There's no crossing of lines here, just two adults choosing each other. When I slipped the ring on her finger, the girls clapped like they were at a magic show. Hope leaned forward and said, "Shiny?" Fate squinted at the ring and asked if it slept in a tiny bed. Paula laughed and wiped her eyes at the same time, which felt like a miracle. I couldn't help myself. I quoted an old line, "Nobody puts baby in a corner," and Paula laughed again, the real laugh, the one that means I picked right. That's the only answer I ever want for any joke. Reverend Ellis came by the next day under the excuse of dropping off soup. He didn't pretend not to know. He smiled, hugged Paula, and said he'd marry us in Gary's backyard when the weather warmed. We picked a date 6 months out and left it at that. No spreadsheets, no stress. Word traveled fast after that. Thane offered his grill without being asked. Morella drew a list and taped it to the fridge like she'd been waiting for this assignment her whole life. Lyle promised bread and winked like it was a contract. Gary said he wanted to handle chairs and a tent, and I didn't argue. That night, after the dishes were done and the girls were down, Paula and I sat at the table with the candles burned low. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. Joanne rolled by, kissed Paula on the cheek and said, "Welcome home," like it was the most normal thing in the world. When everyone finally went to bed, I set 2 alarms like I always did. I folded the dish towels the way Joanne liked, straight edges, no rush. I checked on the girls, each one breathing steady, hands flung wide like they trusted the dark. Then I climbed into bed next to the woman who said yes without hesitation. For the first time in weeks, I slept hard. 4 days after Paula said yes, I looked out the kitchen window and saw Cynthia walking up the driveway in black heels like she was heading to brunch. She wore sunglasses even though the sky was overcast, and there was a man in a charcoal suit 2 steps behind her, holding a leather folder and looking like he charged by the minute. I opened the door before they knocked. Cynthia smiled the way people smile when they know they're not welcome and don't care. The man didn't even introduce himself. He just handed me a thick envelope. "Cynthia Simmons is petitioning for joint legal and physical custody of your daughters, and for child support arrears dating back to birth," he said, flat. I actually laughed. Couldn't help it. It came out wrong, bitter and sharp. The guy didn't flinch. Cynthia pulled off her glasses and stared at me like she was auditioning for sympathy. "They're my kids too, Nate. I have rights. You gave those up the night you ghosted us with a text." The lawyer cleared his throat. "You'll find our contact info in the packet. Please direct all future communication through the firm." They turned and walked back to the car like they'd delivered a pizza, and I stood there with the envelope hanging from my hand, skin hot, teeth clenched. I called Gary first. He didn't pause. "Get everything on paper. Do not react. I'll call Rhodes." Then I called Gavin. He said the same thing. "Don't panic. Document everything. You've done the work. Prove it." When I walked back inside, Paula was already pulling the lockbox from the closet shelf. She set it on the kitchen table and opened it like she was popping a trunk full of ammunition. Stacks of receipts, daycare invoices, clinic slips, babysitter logs, and a spiral notebook with a full timeline. She didn't say anything, just started organizing it by date. Reverend Ellis came by that evening with a pound cake and calm in his voice. He sat across from me while I flipped through the petition and kept his hands folded. "Don't swing back angry," he said. "Tell the truth slow. That's how you keep your ground." Joanne didn't give advice. She just touched my shoulder and said, "Stay steady, baby. Don't let her shake what you already built." We met our attorney 2 days later. Rhodes was compact, sharp-eyed, and already halfway through the file when we walked into her office. "She's in over her head," she said, flipping a page. "This isn't about parenting. This is about avoiding the debts she signed herself into." She pointed to a clause in one of the attached contracts, an exclusive entertainment deal with a nightlife promoter that included penalties, cash advances, and a payout she never earned. There were default notices attached, and a civil suit pending in another state. Rhodes raised her eyebrows. "This is not a woman looking to co-parent," she said. "This is a woman looking for leverage." Then she found a bench warrant for a no-show in a misdemeanor hearing tied to an incident at a club. "Failure to appear," she said. "That changes the risk picture." Over the next few months, we went to court 5 times. I wore the same navy blazer and the same dark tie every time, not because I cared about the look, but because I wanted to show the judge I respected the room. Lyle took time off the bakery to testify. He told the court he'd seen me every Thursday morning for the last 3 years. 2 kids in tow, buying milk, rolls, sometimes yogurt. "He talks to them like grown folks," he said. "Tells them where they're going, what they're doing. They're never scared around him. That's not small." Thane testified too. "I've knocked on that man's door at 3 in the morning when a power surge tripped my alarms. He came out in socks holding a flashlight. Always shows up." Gary sat in that witness box like he'd been born for it. No emotion, just facts. "I never tried to replace Cynthia. I never told him to cut her out. I only ever wanted those girls to have stability." The judge leaned forward at that. "People notice when a grandfather refuses to brag." Cynthia tried to spin it, claimed I hoarded the girls, refused visits, poisoned them against her. Rhodes stayed quiet, then slid a printed stack across the table. Texts, emails, missed calls. Cynthia asking for money at 2 in the morning. Cynthia saying, "I'm not built for this." Cynthia disappearing for months. Then came the home assessment. The social worker showed up on a Wednesday. She met the dog. She walked through the garden, saw the safety locks, the extra rails, the soft edges. She watched bedtime. Hope asking if birds had ears. Fate trying to sing along to take on me. She stood in the kitchen afterward, jotting notes while Paula rinsed dishes and Joanne packed lunch for the next day. She left smiling. Her report used the word secure 3 times in bold. The ruling came in a week later. I kept sole legal and physical custody. Cynthia could petition for supervised visitation, but only after documented stability and proof of debt resolution. The claim for child support arrears was denied. Attorney fees, partially shifted. Outside the courthouse, she stood by the sidewalk with her arms crossed. She didn't have the sunglasses this time, just tired eyes and a frown that looked more practiced than felt. "You turned them against me," she said. I didn't answer, just picked up Hope and took Fate's hand, and we walked to the car like it was any other day. Because it was. Because I'd shown up, and I was going to keep showing up. The weather held just long enough. We stood under a cheap white tent in Gary's backyard, the breeze catching the fabric like it had something to say. Reverend Ellis kept the ceremony short and clean. No filler. Paula held my hand like it was already a habit, not a gesture. The girls dropped petals in uneven handfuls down the aisle, smiling like they owned the place, which they kind of did. We said our vows with mud on our shoes and calluses on our hands, and that made it better. Real. Honest. Gary teared up, but pretended he had dust in his eye. Joanne wore a pale blue dress and beamed like she'd invented the whole day. Gavin showed up with a 6-pack and a crooked tie. Lyle brought a loaf of bread and called it his version of champagne. 11 months later, Paula gripped my hand in the hospital and gave birth to our son. We named him Chance. Not for luck, not for fate, for the word itself. Because we wanted that word to live inside our house for good. I held him against my chest while Paula rested, and the girls stood at the foot of the bed arguing over whether babies could see dreams. Fate said yes. Hope said no. Chance didn't seem to care either way. The following spring, Gary married Joanne in that same backyard. Quiet, simple, right. I stood there grinning like a fool while the girls fought over who got the first piece of cake, and Chance slept through the whole thing in Paula's arms. It felt like we were closing a loop that had been frayed for too long. At the shop, Wallace finally walked the hillside with the new socket. He turned halfway up, looked over his shoulder, and said, "My knee doesn't scream anymore." Gavin walked in later that day with a box of cupcakes and a grin he didn't try to hide. He put the box on the bench and said, "This isn't a miracle. It's a milestone, and we're going to hit more." 2 weeks after that, a competitor reached out, called it an advisory offer, said they liked our early numbers and wanted to propose a financial partnership, maybe delay the pilot, maybe share some of our more sensitive findings. The number was large enough to make my ears ring. I didn't wait. I said no before my coffee had cooled. Then I emailed the lab director and CC'd compliance, laid out the offer, and said I'd disclosed it all voluntarily. After that, I called Wallace and told him we'd pause his case if even a whisper of doubt got raised about our data. He said, "Absolutely not. Keep going." 2 weeks later, an anonymous complaint landed on the director's desk, alleging Gary was steering hospital contracts toward us. The timing was no accident. Same orbit, same petty revenge. Rhodes stepped in again. She went through every firewall Gavin had already set up. Nothing tied Gary to procurement decisions. No favors, no inside tracks. Just clean funding and oversight kept at arm's length. We called in an outside auditor. They tore through everything. Purchase orders, invoices, vendor lists. 3 weeks of review, and they came back with a single-page memo. Books clean, vendor list fair. Nothing flashy, nothing dirty. Nobody framed that memo. But I kept a copy in my drawer. As part of closing the loop, I gave a lunch and learn to the whole lab, walked through our process safeguards, failure mode tracking, supply chain sourcing. People asked sharp questions. I had answers. When the room went quiet, it wasn't awkward. It was respect. After the audit wrapped, Gavin stopped by my bench, leaned on the frame, and said, "You handled that right. That's why you're leading now." He promoted me to lead a 3-person fit team. I didn't take the best cases. I took the worst ones. I brought coffee when I didn't have solutions. I apologized fast when I missed something. I treated the crew like grown men who had a reason to care. They responded to that. Paula, meanwhile, finished a paper on load distribution through adaptive sockets. One of the peer reviewers wrote, "elegant," in the margin. I told anyone who'd listen. Gary and I set up a trust for the kids, hope, fate, and now chance. Nothing flashy, just tight protections, clear rules, backup guardianship, and enough structure to keep their future safe. I breathed easier, knowing the basics were locked in. At home, we ran on the chalkboard system. Daily chores, names next to tasks, little stars drawn by the girls when they felt like being generous. Paula handled the recycling schedule. I did lunches. Joanne took inventory of paper towels like she was tracking gold. Some nights we were tired. Some nights we argued about cereal or shoes or why the twins suddenly hated carrots. But those were good problems. Normal ones. Every time I wiped that chalkboard clean and wrote the next day's plan, I felt lucky to have nothing bigger to fix than muddy boots or a missing sock. The letter came in a plain white envelope, no return address, just my name and handwriting I hadn't seen in years. Inside was one sheet, folded neat, no lawyer speak, just Cynthia's words. She said she'd tried, twice, to get her life steady. Said she wasn't asking for anything, not custody, not money, just a meeting. She wanted to talk. That was it. I handed the letter to Paula while pasta boiled on the stove. She read it twice, then looked up. "Meet her in daylight," she said. "Somewhere public. Keep it short." We picked a diner halfway between our house and whatever she was calling home now. I parked across the lot and walked in 5 minutes early. She was already sitting at a booth by the window, hands wrapped around a coffee cup like it was the only warm thing she had. She looked thinner, not glamorous thin, worn thin, eyes tired, hair pulled back like she hadn't had time or energy to do much with it. No makeup, no games. "Thanks for coming," she said, voice low, almost flat. I sat down. Didn't order anything. She didn't waste time. "I tried to get stable last year," she said. "Made it 6 weeks. Tried again this summer. Made it 2 months. Then I slipped again. I don't want to disrupt their lives by popping in and out." I nodded. Let her talk. They deserve better than me. I know that now. I looked her in the eye. Calm. Straight. "I'm not opening the door, Cynthia. I'm not doing that to them. I'll keep sending school photos to the same P.O. box. If you keep it active, you'll get them. That's the line." She blinked hard, like she was trying not to let tears fall. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small padded envelope. "These are for them. Letters. 1 each. You can give them the day they turn 18. Or not. It's your call." I took the envelope and tucked it into my coat. "Do you hate me?" she asked. I didn't flinch. Didn't sugarcoat it. I don't have space for that. I've got work. I've got kids. I've got a wife who counts on me to stay focused. Hate takes energy I need for real things. She nodded once, wiped under her eyes, and didn't say anything else. I paid the check and stood up. Outside, we paused in the lot like two people who once almost were a family. No hugs, no dramatic goodbye. I got in my car and drove straight to the store, bought milk, picked up some of those cheese crackers the girls liked. Nothing big. When I walked in the door, Paula didn't ask how it went. She just squeezed my hand once, quick, and handed me a clean burp cloth. We put Chance to bed, folded laundry while a dumb comedy played on mute, and fell asleep halfway through the second act. The next day at the lab, I worked with a quiet guy named Arthur. Mid-40s. Lost a leg in an accident 2 years back. Hadn't walked outside since. We fitted him with a socket we'd been tweaking for weeks. I watched him take those first steps into sunlight, stiff but steady, blinking like it was too bright to be real. That moment put everything back in order. Later that week, I moved the envelope into our fireproof box, the one where we kept birth certificates and house papers. I logged the date and wrote a note on a slip of paper. Hold until Hope turns 18. Hold until Fate turns 18. Then I locked it. Not because I forgave her, not because I expected anything, but because lines matter, because I'd rather give them answers one day than regrets. The kitchen was too full, too loud, and exactly right. We packed every chair we had around the table, 2 from the porch, 1 from Joanne's sewing room, even a step stool for Chance when he insisted on being a big boy. Elbows bumped, forks clanked. Nobody minded. Gary stood at the head of the table carving the roast with a grin on his face like he was competing with a Food Network rerun. Joanne leaned over with a smirk and said, "Stop showing off. You're not getting a trophy." "I'm carving with dignity," he shot back. "You're sawing like you're on a timer." Hope and Fate bickered over the pie lineup like it was a court case. Hope wanted chocolate first. Fate said it wasn't fair because she had to sit closer to the green beans. Under the table, Chance was feeding the dog 1 green bean at a time, like it was a sacred mission. The dog played along like he'd signed an oath. Thane and Morella came in with 2 baskets of rolls from Lyle's stand. Morella handed me one with a label that said, "Plain for picky eaters," and winked. Reverend Ellis took the last corner seat and asked Paula about the garden. "We've got 1 tomato," she said, proud and tired. "It's not red yet, but we're hopeful." He nodded like that was a full sermon. Gavin came straight from work, still in his shop coat, with a box of donuts and a manila folder tucked under one arm. He dropped both on the counter and said, "County just signed the mobility contract. It's not flashy, but it's steady and clean." I tapped the folder and said, "That's what wins games, right? Defense and clean passes." "The 80s called," Paula muttered. "They want their metaphors back." I grinned at the girls, who were only half listening and busy turning napkins into hats. "You know why I like 80s movies?" I asked. Because they always come back to the crew at the end. You win together or you don't win. That's your third speech this week, Paula said, rolling her eyes. Yeah, but I recycle material. She kissed me anyway, just a quick one over the mashed potatoes. She'd just finished building a prototype jig to help measure residual limb pressure points faster. Gavin said it could cut hours off the fitting process. I said it made her the smartest person in the house. She didn't argue. Gary reached across the table and clapped Chance on the shoulder. "This one's our #1 wild card," he said. Chance didn't look up. He was too busy hiding another green bean under the napkin like it was state evidence. I caught Gary looking around the room like he was counting heads in a dream that finally came true. His eyes lingered on Joanne, who was handing out paper towels instead of napkins like it was a tactical decision. She leaned over to me as she passed one and whispered, "We made it, baby." I didn't say anything. I just nodded. Sometimes the truth doesn't need more words. After dessert, 3 pies, no clear winner, we set up the camera and took a family photo in front of the fridge. Half of us blinked. Hope had whipped cream on her nose. Gavin held up a donut like a trophy. It looked perfect to me. I printed 2 copies that night. One went on the fridge under a heart magnet. The other I slid into the fireproof box beside Cynthia's letters and the trust paperwork. When everyone left and the yard was quiet again, I stood in the doorway and looked at the counter. It was clean. No bottles, no formula cans, no scribbled feeding logs, just a dish towel drying, the hum of the fridge, and a soft breeze through the open window. Here's what I know now. I didn't get here by being clever. And I didn't get here alone. I showed up. Other people showed up, and we kept moving. In the end, that was enough. Before you head out, can I ask you something real? When life finally starts going right, do you let yourself trust it? Or do you wait for the next thing to go wrong? If this story hit you, tap the hype button to help it reach someone who might need it. Don't forget to subscribe and like. It's just one click, but it means the world to us. And drop a comment, even just "powerful story." I'd love to hear what you think.